Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters. This is the show that gets the opportunity for you all to talk to and listen to authors, editors, and publishers up close and personal and hear what they have to say about their careers. I'm your host, Carter Seaton, and we're delighted to have you with us today. And today our guest is John Hash. John is now a writer and publisher, but he grew up in Charleston and received his undergraduate degree from Duke University and his law degree from West Virginia University. He practiced law in Huntington, Lexington, and Winston-Salem for 30 years, and he's now retired, living in Huntington with his wife Susan and their 5 dogs. He's also a former licensed pilot and an active bullseye pistol competitor. There we go. Thank you. After writing his early books, Honey Branches, about the Meade estate, and Starkeeper, which was a series of short stories, he launched a series featuring a secret agent who heads a bunch of professionals located at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona, and they report directly to the president. His publishing company, Wilshire Books, LLC, has published his own books and dozens of those of Appalachian writers. John, thanks for joining us today. We're glad to have you.
It's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so I believe that you are probably the second author that we've interviewed that has written a series with the same protagonist, Craig Johnson being the first. So,
well, gee, that's quite an honor.
So yours is entirely different, of course, from the sheriff of Absaroka County. Yeah. He's an interesting character. How did you, well, when you first started writing this character, did you intend to do a series?
No, I didn't. I had no idea it was going to result in a series. It just hit me, and that's the way things happen when you're writing fiction, and or when I'm writing fiction. It all started with our protagonist, Laro. He was sitting in the library working on the computer, and a voice behind him said, would you be interested in a little temporary work? And he said, well, perhaps. What is it like? And he said, well, it entails travel, and it'll take about 2 months. And Laro said, what kind of risk involved? It is involved. And he said, substantial. And he said, well, tell me more. And so the man said, it's like this. We'll deposit $100,000 in your checking account up front. We'll pay you another $100,000 when you're through. You will leave on Friday. A taxi cab will pull up in front of your apartment at precisely 3 o'clock. You get in the cab, there'll be an envelope there with instructions. Just follow the instructions and we'll see you then. And so now I have to tell you, Laro is a widower.
I was going to say, how in the world, why wouldn't you just whirl around and say, who the hell are you, buddy? You know?
Well, that's a good question. Sometimes things happen strangely, but Laro, as I said, was a widower, and he was a retired airline pilot.
Okay.
Well, after the Air Force, he went with an airline that eventually failed, and so he took early retirement and took a part-time job rebuilding the auxiliary engines in jet planes for an airline in Pittsburgh. And that's where the thing starts. And from there, he gets involved. And I wrote the first book pretty quickly, actually. It just kind of evolved. I don't know how his creative juices were flowing, and that's how it worked. But
what's his real name?
Well, we don't know his real name, but the name he uses is Dan Roman.
Okay.
Dan Roman is, you may recognize that name. Dan Roman was the name of the character played by John Wayne in the movie The High and the Mighty.
Oh, okay.
And anybody who is a pilot or has read Ernest K. Gann's works will get goosebumps at that revelation. But he uses the name Dan Roman when he needs a civil name. And Laro is the last syllable of pistolero. And so when he reports in, they ask him to adopt a 4-letter nom de plume, nom de guerre, and write it down and send it in. And so he became Laro.
Okay. All right. So I know a lot of authors, and I've done this too, it's not uncommon to use things in their life and put them with the character they've got. So since you're a pistol competitor, is that why you chose Pistolero as a name for him?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, what will I name this guy? And I thought, well, how about Pistolero? And then, no, Lero. So that's how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you're right.
Is he a
there's a lot
competitive
of
shooter,
real
or is he
world.
just really good with a gun?
He has been a competitive shooter, but he's no longer.
Okay.
His work takes him away from it, but he practices. They have a range near his office in Tucson, and some of the books contain practices. In fact, one of them, he's at the range practicing when the president calls him. But he's no longer active with it, and he is still an active pilot. He owns a twin Comanche, Piper twin Comanche airplane, and it's involved in a lot of these
some
stories.
of the books, right.
And
Okay.
I had a twin Comanche for 5.5 wonderful years.
Okay, so where do these ideas come from? And you said that one just kind of poof popped into your head, but are they, as they say, ripped from the headlines, or are they things that you dream up that are? I mean, I know you've talked about terrorists and the Ayatollah and things like that. So, do your ideas come from, say, reading articles in the newspaper?
Oh yeah, a lot of it. My great interest is foreign affairs, and I read constantly. And yeah, a lot of the plots are based on what if, given a set of real facts. I thought, well, what if? And this one is a what if situation. This Laro's Mission, the first book, is about. How do I start? Laro's Mission is about upfitting a Cold War British bomber to fly nonstop from Tucson to an undisclosed location in a Central Asian nation. And he is charged with getting it ready. This plane has been sitting for many years. But they mothball planes at Davis-Monthan, and so the plane is just like new because the air there is so dry that they can store planes a long time.
Yeah.
Put new tires on it, change the oil. There are a lot of things you have to do, but not nearly like you'd have to do if it sat on the ground here for 10 years. But he's in charge of rehabilitating this bomber, a Vulcan bomber, and it's fast, it's noisy, but it's fast. And he comes up with a design to quiet the engines. And they're impressed with that, so they hire him full-time at that point. And he meets the people behind the curtain, so to speak. So
is that the mission, or is there a mission after the plane's refurbed?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What happens is, like several of these, the mission as originally conceived goes a little bit awry, and something has to be done. And in some of them, he's the one who has to step in and take care of business.
Okay.
And that happens in this case. He ends up on this bomber over a Central Asian country, and the object is they have guided bombs, which are not just guided, but they're state of the art. They're really good. Anyway, their job is to drop 4 bombs on one spot at high speed, and they approach from the ocean at low altitude at night, no lights, and that's how he. And then the plan is that the bomber will fly clear across this country and ditch in the Black Sea. And that happens. They ditch, and then from there he tries to get home.
All right, do you consider your books thrillers, adventure stories, intrigue, spy stories? What do you call these? I mean, I know they don't have a genre, they're just, but how do you call that?
That's a good question, because it's a bit of...
Everything?
well, yeah, but also it's a bit of bragging to say they're thrillers. I hope people are thrilled, but that's probably where it would fit.
Okay.
It's not a spy thing, although, like in this second book, Go Get Nadja, he goes to rescue a spy
Right.
in the same country that we haven't talked about.
Okay.
But it's hard to categorize it, but I'd say if people ask me it, I'd say it's a government contractor, secret agent type stuff.
Okay, all right. Okay, so now tell me about Jean. Is she also, in which book is she introduced, first of all?
The first book.
Okay, all right. So is she just his love interest, or is she also a secret agent?
Oh, she's a secret agent too. Jean is probably, if I had to guess, she's probably 6 or 7 or 8 years younger than Laro. And she's been at Davis-Monthan for a long time. She came west with her father, who was asked to come and apply for a job in the avionics shop at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base to maintain the radios for all the planes. And he was an interesting guy, and he's out of the picture now. He has passed away, and she took over. She learned to do everything he knew how to do, and she's sharp. And she went to college on the side, got her degree, and she's working in the avionics shop, and this project brings them together.
I see.
And actually, when they meet, it's at a Bible study group. He goes to a Wednesday morning Bible study group, and he meets her there. And the third time he goes, she invites him to dinner, and things develop from there.
I was going to say, but they do become lovers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right. Your books are detailed about the workings of airplanes, about the pistols and so forth. And I know you've been a pilot, but of private planes, not, old bombers, for instance. Did you have to do a lot of research for that, or is that just a bigger version of what you already knew about working on your own plane?
Well, it's a combination of both, but it's more that I had to do additional research than use what I learned about my plane or planes. And there was a good bit of research involved. And the fellow who took this picture is a Britisher. I think his name is Stackhouse, but I don't recall it clearly. I wrote to him and asked him if I could use this picture, and he said sure. So, but yes, I had to do a good bit of research and actually the research led me to this plane. I thought, let's use an old bomber of some kind. What would be best? And this one fit the bill.
I see.
It actually, when they do the mission, they have to refuel over the ocean 3 times, and they have 2 crews. And there's an Army base and Air Force base combined in South Arizona called Fort Huachuca, and it is the headquarters of the Intelligence Command.
I see.
There are 30,000 people there, and there are antennae looking for any broadcast from anywhere. They have a heliostat, which is a tethered balloon at 14,000 feet, so they can reach way into South America. And so one night, as they are taking off, the radar cab there has a corpsman working in it, and he calls to the colonel and says, "Colonel, would you come here a second?" He said, "This is a large blip here and it has no transponder. What do I do?" And he said, "Strange things happen in the desert at night. Just forget about it." So they're off the ground, low level, just cruising along, not at high speed. They just need to get out of the country at low level.
Yeah.
And so that's how their flight starts.
Do you enjoy that research?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Do you ever find yourself kind of going down a rabbit hole that you really don't need just because you're enjoying the rabbit hole?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you awaken and say, "Well, wait a minute, what am I doing here? This started out to be such and such, and now I'm over here."
Yeah, off here in left field someplace.
But as long as it's about airplanes, it's not wasted. But it's
Right.
sure. And you probably experience the same thing. You get distracted from your main train of thought, and all of a sudden you'll say, "Wait a minute, what am I doing here?" Back up and go. Get back on the track.
Right. So how many books are in the series now?
8.
8. Do you recommend reading them in order?
Yes, but it's not necessary. It would help if you'd read the first one first, and after that, you can read just about any of them.
Because that one does a good job of introducing the characters.
Yes, yes. One of the, you asked me about Jean, and I appreciate that. Jean is sweet. She's a nice person, and they're very attached to each other, shall we say. The boss, when he reports in, is a man called Jefe, which in Spanish means chief, and he's in charge. And he likes Laro. He likes what Laro has suggestions about upfitting this bomber, and so Laro works his way into the situation. And Jefe is an interesting character. He's 62, I think, when this starts, and he's been in the clandestine services for 35 years.
Would he not disapprove of them working together since they're sort of attached?
That's a great question, because that happens. They get caught, and it turns out that they're watching Laro. They're watching all the guys. There's a crew of about 6 guys who have been hired to upfit this plane. All have different skills. Some of them are engine men, some of them are brakes and tires, some of them are airframe, so they're watching all these guys. Well, they find out that Laro has spent the night at Jean's house, and so they call him into the office and say, hey, we told you no fraternizing, and be careful with yourself. How do you know she's not a spy? And after that, he kind of chuckles because he knew she wasn't a spy. But anyway, Laro takes the blame for it. He said, "It is entirely my fault, and don't blame her. This is my fault. If I've crossed the line, you can just tell me and I'll leave." And he says, "Well, no. Ordinarily, we would, but," he said, "the two of you have got something together that we need. You work well together, and let's give it a try." Okay. So they are enabled to continue staying together. And she has a house, 123 Sunset Drive. But anyway.
Do you have a favorite of this series?
Yes, I think so. I think if I had to pick a favorite, there are 2. Go Get Nadja and Falcon Strike.
Okay.
Falcon Strike is a sentimental, in a way, book because it's about the death of the Chief of Staff's son. He's a major in the Israeli Defense Force, and he and his associate are eating lunch in a restaurant in Tel Aviv, and 2 men ride in on a motorcycle, ride right into the restaurant in the motorcycle and detonate a bomb, killing themselves and everybody in there. And so it's a terrible blow. The president, of course, is close friends with Corey Haim, that's the name of the Israeli chief of staff. So the president, at that point, asks Laro to get Jefe right quick and meet him, and the three of them get into a private plane. Actually, it's a Gulfstream G5, and they fly to Israel nonstop to be at the funeral. Because, as I understand it, in the Jewish faith, burials take place rather quickly.
24 hours, right.
And so they flew, and of course it was raining when they got there. And they go to the funeral, to the burial, and the president's wearing a Homburg hat and a wig and a mustache, so he can not be recognized by the people who are there. And it's a very tender moment when the president steps up to the head of the line to speak to Corey Haim, and they, of course, hug, and then he realizes that Hefe's there and Laro's there. And Laro and Jefe and Corey Haim have worked together on a couple of cases, and they're close. So there's a sort of a group hug, and the chief of staff tells him how much it meant to him for him to come. And he whispers, "Thank you, Mr. President," and because he knew who he was dealing with,
right.
But nobody else could hear that. And then they gradually ease back in the crowd and walk to their vehicle and get to the plane and fly home. And when they land at Washington National, the fixed base operation there. And the president thanks the pilot and the Secret Service guy with him. Thanks for setting this up. I know this was out of line, and you may be fired over this, but I'll cover it for you. But thank you for doing this.
So what's the mission in that one after?
The mission of the Falcon Strike is revenge, which is one of human beings' most vibrant and
favorite
virulent
pastimes, right?
Passions. In fact, if you would interrogate an Afghan person, male or female, and ask them the three most important things to a person where you are, they would say loyalty to the tribe, courtesy to visitors, and revenge.
Wow.
And so this is a revenge mission, and what they do in Falcon Strike, they use a French Mirage fighter plane that was captured by the Israelis in the last skirmish with Egypt. And it's in a hangar at their air base. And so they upfit it and turn it into a drone. And Laro, well, the Israelis are going to send an agent in to use a laser designator and paint the building or vehicle where the Ayatollah is, so they can fly this plane into the building or into the vehicle. And so when Laro gets to Camp David, he tells, the president tells him what the mission is, and he says, do you want me to make sure that, do you want me to interfere with the mission so they won't kill the Ayatollah, because it might result in a world war? And the president takes a sip of his non-alcoholic beer and says, no, I want to make sure they succeed. Mm-hmm. And so Laro is backup, and he and Gene make they take apart a laser designator and put it into aircraft radios in pieces so that they can put it back together when they get into this nation that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And they do that, and he is painting the vehicle that the Ayatollah is in, and the strike takes place, and it blows the front off of the building he's in, and he's seriously injured.
Okay.
It's the worst injury in the whole thing, but...
Okay. Don't tell us the whole ending.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So are you working on another Laro book?
Yes. I started one about a month ago, and things happen. I thought of an idea, and it again involves the Israelis and the Iranians. And I started the first chapter, and then the Iranians did, the Israelis did what I was going to theorize it would be a good idea to do. Uh-huh. So they did that. So they wiped away my plot. So I've got chapter 1 of the next book, but now I've got to think of another plot.
Well, maybe you should say what if they didn't do it.
Yeah.
What's your writing process? Do you write every day? Do you have a set time?
No. I'm a spurt writer. I wait until I'm good and ready, and I sit down and write until I'm through. And sometimes I'll write, 300 or 400 words. My record, I think, is 3,800 words in a day. And when it comes out, it just comes out. When things start falling into place, you can really romp. You can really run with it, and that happens. But I do not say, now I'm going to write every morning at 8 o'clock. No way. All
right, do you go back then, let's say you haven't written for several weeks, do you go back and read what you had written, or are you, this whole time that you're not writing, thinking about the story and you know where you're going to go?
All of those. All of those. Yes, I think about it, and yes, I go back and read. I may not read microscopically, but I scan or briskly read through the story to bring me up to date, and then I will say, okay, I'm ready to go, and I will write, and I type as much as I can until the juice runs out.
I see. Okay. All right. So how do people get your books?
Well, they're on Amazon. If they just put in my name, John Hash or John L. Hash, because some of them are John Hash and some of them are John L. Hash.
Okay.
And if they just put that in, it will take them to these books. And I will say I have Well, I have these 8 books, and I have 2 others that we'll maybe talk about later, and I have numerous books that I have published for others.
Right. I was going to ask you just briefly about your publishing company. When did you start doing that?
I think it's been about 5 years.
And was the original idea just because you were publishing your own books, and then you thought, well, I'll just do this for other people as well?
Yes. I commenced into this without that knowledge or intention, but as I got further into it, I thought I had the ability to publish with Amazon. They have now changed to KDP Amazon, and so I became a publisher with them, and I let the word get out that I was a publisher, and I've had, I think, an interesting run of it. I've published, well, probably in the low 30s of books now, and they've run the gamut from a scientific medical treatise to a science fiction story about children on a foreign planet, and that was written by our friend Joy Garrison, and or Carol Joy Garrison.
Sure.
And but there, I published a book about quilts, and I published the book about scaries that you know about.
Now, how do you find those? Would you have to put in Wilshire Publishing into Amazon to get those?
I don't know. Probably would work if you'd say Wilshire Publishing.
Okay.
Wilshire Books, LLC.
Okay.
And there are, well, I don't know, I'd have to guess 20 probably books published for other people.
That's good.
And the one that you mentioned, I mentioned, the Book of Scaries, is one of the latest ones I've done, and it has been printed now 4 times.
That's great.
So,
That's great.
and it's really fun. This lady who wrote it is an Appalachian south of here, and there are numerous local stories that she thought this would be interesting, so she wrote a book about it, and it's sold like hotcakes.
That's great. That's great. I think we're almost out of time, but I just want to ask maybe one more question. Which do you prefer to do, write or publish, or does it just matter which mood you're in?
That's a great question, and I'd have to say I don't know, because I like both. My writing does not take so much of my time that it would crowd out editing and publishing. I can do them half and half and be comfortable, and I do that. Sometimes when I'm writing, I might slow down a little bit on the publishing, but I do both, and that keeps it interesting and varied.
Right.
And variety, is the spice of life. So
Yeah, right. I think this has been fascinating, and I hope people will take the opportunity to look at the Laro books and maybe become fans of Laro from the very beginning and go right straight through to the 8th book and whatever comes next. Thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
It's really fascinating to hear about him, your writing project, Gene, and what's coming next. Thank you all for tuning in today. I appreciate it. This is Carter Seaton saying stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Connect with Chapters through email. Write to lp4@zoominternet.net. Chapters has a Facebook page at Armstrong Chapters. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. All Chapters episodes are available on YouTube. Visit the Armstrong Neighborhood channel on YouTube and look for a playlist of all the Chapters programs.